good evening, or whatever brand of darkness is swirling outside your window. Glad you are here, settling in for a story with questionable standards of hygiene. If you enjoy drifting off to tales that make your mattress feel even more luxurious, you know where those buttons are. Let me know in the comments what time and place you are listening from. I am always amused by who is trying to sleep in Melbourne versus, say, Wisconsin. Dim the lights, stretch out, and maybe grab a drink that is not room temperature ale. Let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up confused. Something is wrong. First, there is an unfamiliar weight to your limbs, as if you have borrowed a body built from leftovers and regret. Someone's elbow is wedged professionally into your ribs, not in any romantic way. Your cheek is pressed to a splintery wooden board that feels like it was sanded with rocks and seasoned with 1,000 spilled drinks. You try to turn your head. Immediately, the air informs you of your mistake. The scent here is not one note, but a chorus. Heavy smoke twists with the raw honesty of sweat, the sharp bite of cheap ale, and the complex undertones of centuries of feet. There must be 1,000 years worth of spilled beer steeped into these floorboards, each one competing for your nostrils' attention. You inhale again, out of curiosity, or maybe denial, and find that curiosity does not pay off. Your tongue feels woolly. Some brave, sticky residue clings to your lips. You hope it is ale and not something more mysterious, but this room does not seem like a place where hope thrives. As you try to sit up, your bones complain. There is a dampness to your shirt, colder than is reasonable, and your socks, assuming you still own socks, are soaked through. You remember, with a sense of personal loss, all the things you have left behind: your toothbrush, running water, dry cotton, and the basic expectation that bodies are not for sharing. Someone nearby groans. Someone else laughs the kind of laugh that usually comes after losing money or winning something truly regrettable. There's a fire roaring in a crooked stone hearth, but the heat does not reach you. Instead, it fights a losing battle with the wind leaking through warped shutters. The smoke clings low, hugging the uneven ceiling, drawn toward your lungs by some tragic, magnetic urge. You glance around, hoping for a friendly face, or even just a face without open sores. The first person you make eye contact with manages both eye contact and a sneer, which is frankly impressive. You look away fast enough to avoid a challenge. Music twangs somewhere, if you can call it music. A fiddler plays an instrument that may or may not have actual strings, and the local chorus of drunk singing follows at its own pitch and tempo. There's a brief flash of optimism. Maybe you will be swept into a rollicking tale of adventure or romance. Then a mug flies past your ear, missing you by the width of a bad decision. The mug lands, shatters, and a slow puddle works its way toward your knees. Even if you wanted to stand up and escape, your legs are numb from the unforgiving bench and someone else's body weight. A kindly barmaid, if that is what she is, nods at you and slides something resembling a cup in your direction. The contents are warmer than room temperature, but not nearly warm enough to be comforting. You raise it to your lips, hesitate, and then lower it again. For a split second, you miss drinks that come in glasses that do not make you question your last tetanus shot. You notice your fellow tavern citizens. One is unconscious, face down in a puddle. Another stares into the fire, perhaps regretting every decision since birth. A third picks something from his teeth with a bone, but offers a polite enough nod. So that might mean friendship or robbery. You glance down and discover your shoes, if they can be called that, are one wet toe away from retirement. You wiggle your feet once, twice. There is a squelching sound. You try to convince yourself it is ale, but you know this is wishful thinking. If you were hoping to meet your soulmate tonight, it seems fate has other plans. Unless your type happens to be a limping woodcutter with an enthusiastic cough and one eyebrow. You sigh, the sound swallowed by the low roar of a truly lived-in crowd. This is not a place for modern comforts. It is not a place for modesty, softness, or the illusion of privacy. But here you are, sticky and achy, blinking in the flickering light, waiting for the night to decide just how much stranger it will get. And really, you have only just arrived. You decide to take stock, not that counting your blessings will take long, but you want to know what fresh hazards you are dealing with. The ceiling hovers somewhere above, blanketed by a crust of black soot that is both impressive and unsettling. Every time the fire spits, another feeble wisp of smoke joins the ancient collection up there, like the ceiling is auditioning to become a second floor, entirely made of carbon. The lighting leaves plenty to the imagination. A few wall-mounted torches, flickering bravely, do their best to illuminate exactly 3 feet in any direction. Beyond that, everything dissolves into varying shades of shadow and questionable intent. Whoever is singing near the doorway might be missing half their lyrics, but you will never know for sure, because it is impossible to see much further than the next sticky tabletop. Speaking of sticky, your hand comes away from the bench wearing a new glaze. Is it mead? Is it an experimental soup? The only thing you know for sure is it will never be truly clean again. Every surface here advertises its history by texture alone. The tables lean with age, slumping under the weight of decades. Worth of elbows, mugs, and the occasional dramatic gesture gone wrong. If you were hoping to set your phone down, forget it. Anything that lands here is now community property and probably contagious. You try to move. Too bad the crowd is not just dense, it is mobile. Bodies bump past you at unpredictable intervals, fueled by hearty enthusiasm and a relaxed approach to personal space. There are shouts at the bar as one man insists he paid for 2 ales, and he will not leave until someone invents the receipt. There is laughter, singing, and for a moment, a definite braying noise that sounds suspiciously like a goat. Whether the tavern has livestock as guests or staff is never clarified. The air is where hope goes to die. Imagine a blend of old ale, smoldering wood, and the back of a stranger's throat. Then add mud, wet dog, and a suggestion of something agricultural. No candle or spritz of air freshener has touched this place, unless you count the scent of burning fat when something from the kitchen goes wrong. You spot a promising chair. Hope flickers. Maybe here, just this once, you might find a patch of dryness, a little oasis of comfort. As you get closer, a large man beats you to it. He collapses, sending a shockwave through the bench. His tankard sloshes its contents down his front, which seems to improve matters for both him and the bench, given the pre-existing stains. You move on. Another seat reveals itself, looking surprisingly vacant. You glide in, only to stand up just as fast. The seat is not only wet, it has a temperature and texture better left unexamined. You try to casually wipe your hands, but the only available cloth is your own clothing, which now graduates to the next level of medieval immersion. Around you, the crowd keeps thickening. A woman belts out a folk song you will not find on any playlist. Someone bangs a mug for emphasis, hoping to be heard over the waves of conversation. And every so often, a rowdy cheer when another round arrives. Someone else proposes a toast, and it is not clear whether they are celebrating, commiserating, or challenging you to a duel. You offer a polite nod and avoid eye contact. The floor is a marvel in itself. Every step is an adventure. Here is a patch of hay meant to soak up spills. There, a muddy boot print leading directly onto your own foot. Your boot squelches, and the sensation is not improved by imagining just what was spilled here over the centuries. Underfoot, countless mysteries remain unsolved. There are bones, probably chicken if you are lucky, and something that crunches in a way that definitely is not food. You pause, breathing shallowly. The idea of an appetizer, a little bowl of salted nuts or chips, strikes you as the height of luxury. Here, the only snack within reach appears to be whatever bread fragment you can pry from the table, assuming you are comfortable with the odds. Over in the corner, someone attempts to dance. It begins with joyful stomping and ends with a spectacular collision into a bench, taking both dignity and 2 mugs with him. Everyone laughs, which in this place means either camaraderie or a sign to keep your head down. You begin to think longingly of modern nightlife, the bathrooms that lock, the bouncers who only ask you to leave politely, the handful of friends you actually know by name. If someone left a 3-star review for this establishment, it was generosity or perhaps illiteracy. Somewhere across the room, the goat, yes, it is definitely a goat, climbs onto a lower shelf and inspects a loaf of bread with the expertise of a regular. At this point, even the livestock expect to be served before you. The air grows thicker as the evening drags on. Heat from bodies, heat from the fire, heat from the cumulative anxiety of visitors who, like you, realize there is no escape until sunrise or until you forget your standards entirely. You settle for perching awkwardly on the edge of a shared bench, resigned to your fate and your steadily stickier elbows. If nothing else, you have an utterly authentic night out. No velvet ropes, no cocktail menus, no coasters with ironic slogans, just a crowd, a goat, suspicious floor puddles, and the undeniable urge to keep your shoes on until you make it home. Or at least, until you remember which century you came from. You take a moment to assess the outfit destiny has saddled you with. At first glance, it is just fabric and string, nothing too menacing. But a closer inspection reveals a tapestry of stains and mystery smudges. Your shirt is thick, somewhere between burlap and towel, with seams that have never heard of comfort or thread counts. A collar scratches at your neck. It manages to be both too high and too limp, drooping on one side as if even the shirt is tired of itself. Everything sags in a way that suggests long service and little soap. The color is hard to define, somewhere in the range of dishwater and questionable potato. Under your arms, damp patches bloom, unapologetic and fragrant. There is a rough wool vest wrestling your shoulders, paired with hose that feel about as private as a hospital gown, but twice as itchy. Then there are the shoes. Calling them shoes is generous. Bags, perhaps, loosely attached to your feet with leather cords and noble intentions. The left trudges along, determined but hopelessly flat. The right has a lumpy surprise near the toe, maybe straw, maybe last year's mud. Who can say? Every step is announced by a squelch or scuff, a constant reminder that blister balm is centuries away. The crowd around you is a festival of fashion fatigue. People are cloaked in linen, wool, or whatever they manage to drape around themselves before stumbling out the door tonight. Belts ride high, tunics ride low, and essentially everyone seems to have made peace with pit stains. Personal grooming here is less an emergency and more a lost cause. If anyone is judging you, it is probably because you have not yet produced a heroic odor. You try to catch your reflection in a patch of warped tin nailed behind the bar. The image is more suggestion than substance. But there you are. Hair has taken interesting liberties, standing up in tufts or sticking out at improbable angles. Your cheeks have a sheen that owes nothing to skincare routines. Evidence of the tavern, ale splatter, errant crumbs decorates you as if you have been marked by the establishment itself. You long for the reassuring hug of clean laundry. You miss the simple pleasure of a fabric softener ad, or the bravado that comes from knowing you have chosen your outfit on purpose. Here, the only sense of style you possess is a desperate hope for fewer fleas. The itch settles in as you shift your weight from one foot to the other. The wool vest grinds mercilessly at your neck and arms, as if it has a personal vendetta. Wherever your socks end, discomfort begins. You try to nonchalantly adjust, but there is no hiding the awkward shuffle. A man 2 seats down gives you a sympathetic nod. He scratches, you scratch. No words, just a moment of solidarity in suffering. Deodorant is a distant, sparkling fantasy. You entertain thoughts of shaving, of moisturizer, of that blissful clean t-shirt feeling. It is easier to imagine being crowned king than finding a stick of antiperspirant nearby. Every so often, you catch someone's eye and wonder, are they sniffing the air or just always look like that? Confidence is hard to come by. You huddle into your scratchy cocoon and aim for invisibility, fearing either mockery or, worse, acceptance, which might require actually talking. You spot a lone barmaid who seems to have achieved the impossible. Her apron is dirtier than your entire outfit. Maybe that is the local version of fashion forward. The noise, the smells, the shifting tangle of bodies, everything tells you that nobody really notices or cares about your questionable couture, at least not compared to everything else fighting for attention. Still, you cannot help but try to tug your shirt lower, adjust your collar, or flatten your hair using spit and hope. You remind yourself, nobody here expects you to have a laundry day. There is no lost and found bin for left behind confidence. If you smell, at least tonight, you are in excellent company. Hunger creeps in, ignorant of the setting. You decide to brave the frontier between curiosity and self-preservation, ordering something to eat, and, even riskier, something to drink. Spoiled as you are by apps and laminated menus, this is a new frontier. There are no specials tonight. There is not even a menu, unless you count the stains on the wall, which seem to serve as a record of previous attempts. Making your way to the bar is an exercise in courage and creative sidestepping. The bar itself is a plank of wood shaped by heavy mugs, mysterious gouges, and the relentless humidity of spilt beer. You attempt to signal for service. The tavern keeper responds with exactly the amount of enthusiasm you would expect from someone who has not had a Friday off since the invention of the chair. You open your mouth to order, realize you have no idea what the offerings are, then settle on the universal gesture, point at someone else's drink, and nod with as much false confidence as you can muster. A mug is slammed down in front of you. It is sticky before you even touch it. The wooden cup is roughly cylindrical, carved by someone who had strong feelings about splinters. Inside awaits the legendary local ale, cloudy, faintly brown, and just warm enough to remind you of bodies and regret. Taking a cautious sniff, you wonder if anyone has ever requested a glass of water here and lived to tell the tale. You sip. The flavor is both underwhelming and overpowering. There is a bitter tang paired with the murky memory of a distant hop. It is not quite spoiled, but it is actively considering the possibility. Carbonation has been replaced by the gentle fizz of fermentation going rogue. You keep expecting someone to toss in a slice of lemon, maybe a cursory wedge of lime, but you know you are centuries away from citrus and closer to dental emergencies than you would like. Off to the side, a hunched woman ladles something into a bowl. You catch her eye, hoping the look means food, and she thrusts out a shallow bowl with what you tell yourself is soup. The liquid is beige, with floating fragments that could be bread, vegetables, or dreams unrealized. One cautious taste sends a cascade of feelings down your spine, mainly nostalgia for salt, and for seasons where food is not a leap of faith. Bread comes next. The loaf appears, torn in places, with a crust that could double as a defensive weapon. You break off a piece eventually and attempt to chew. Inside, it is dense, grayish, and packed with the sort of seeds you find in the wild, not the store. The flavor is both ancient and immediate. Your teeth do their duty, and you make a silent promise never to complain about store-brand sandwich bread again. As for bar snacks, there are none, unless you count the scatterings of questionable crumbs and a whiff of cheese best left undisturbed. You have never been so grateful for the concept of clean hands and table service. The only thing salted here is the air, with a dash of resentment and more than a little sweat. Nobody asks for your dietary preferences. You imagine explaining gluten-free or nut allergies in this crowd and laugh, then cough for good measure. The closest thing to modern mixology is watching someone add a ladle of river water to a second-hand beer. Food innovations are limited to deciding which chunk of bread is least likely to break a tooth. A group at the neighboring table attempts to toast, gulps of ale sloshing in uneven waves, mostly landing in beards and lapels. One man swears with satisfaction, swiping a hand across his mouth and smearing whatever has not already soaked into his chin. You look down at your own mug, try another drink, and discover it has not improved with time, though your taste buds may be settling into surrender. You eye the remains of your meal, half-chewed bread, the remnants of something green, a swill of ale. In another life, you might post a sarcastic review or snap a filtered photo. Here, you simply look around and realize that for everyone else, this is peak cuisine. The chef is somewhere in the background, bellowing for more firewood. The only special request is that your food arrives sooner than your next birthday. Despite everything, the stickiness, the flavor roulette, the complete lack of napkins, you find yourself strangely satisfied, or at least resigned. Hunger bows to stubbornness, warmth fills you, or perhaps it is the early warning of food poisoning. Still, in this room, surrounded by laughter, spilled drinks, and a parade of culinary bravery, you are fully present. If only you could warn your past self about the joys of warm, flat ale and bread with more personality than flavor. But here and now, You are part of the feast, pitiful, strange, and incapable of ordering a cocktail. For tonight, that will have to be enough. You are midway through negotiating a particularly chewy bite of bread when you feel a sharp elbow in your side. A peasant, cheeks rosy with drink and enthusiasm, leans in close, much too close for anyone who grew up knowing about personal space. He greets you with a question that is less words and more volume. Well then, whose pig did you trip over this week? Or are you town-bred, never even shoveled slop? Before you can invent a background that sounds halfway plausible, he launches into a story about his cousin's eel-catching contest and the unfortunate results involving a barrel of old turnips. You nod along, smiling wherever it seems safe. Every so often, he pats your shoulder, leaving a constellation of bread crumbs in his wake. Apparently, you have made a friend, or at least an audience. No sooner has the peasant turned to shout for another round than a knight stumbles up, armor dinged and chest puffed like a rooster in cheap tin. His voice booms across your table. You there. Spent much time atop a horse. You seem soft about the hips. No matter, most are, after their first joust. He winks, draining his mug, clearly expecting congratulations. Before you can respond or protest your innocence, he launches into a speech about his glorious victory in a muddy field you have never heard of. There are hand gestures, some of which seem anatomically improbable. Every word smells faintly of onions, and what the knight claims is imported wine. The local merchant eyes you from across the table, shuffling a mysterious pouch and scanning your sleeves for valuables. He grins, asks what you do for profit, then offers you a deal on turnip futures you do not want. You try to mumble a polite no, but he moves on to impromptu market analysis, half warnings about highwaymen, and a description of his neighbor's suspicious chickens. Small talk here is a full-body sport. Everyone wants to know where you come from, what work you do, and why you have got such soft hands. Seriously, is it a condition? Every answer you give seems to inspire more questions or sidelong glances. You long for the gentle agony of a modern cocktail party, where the worst you face is a debate about craft beer. Gossip weaves through the air like smoke. Who has been caught stealing eggs? Who is feuding with whom? Who has washed? And who is bragging about it? Your friendly peasant leans in for an update on the tanner's rash. A woman in a tattered cap interrupts just to ask if you are single. Not for herself, of course, but for a friend who is between marriages and currently outside chasing geese. Every introduction comes with a handshake, a slap on the back, or a sudden revise of your name. You become whoever the crowd decides you are. When someone calls you Bill, you answer. Bill now, apparently. Questions about your shoes, your strange accent, and your lack of local drinking stamina come with little mercy and plenty of advice. You catch yourself thinking longingly of awkward silences. There are none here. The banter booms. The competition for best story runs hot, and your attempts to fade into the background are met first with confusion, then mock concern for your ill humors. You join in, tentatively. Someone passes you a mug, possibly with the hope you will sing, or just to see your reaction to the taste. In this room, everyone is a little too loud, a little too nosy, but against your better judgment, you start to enjoy it. You are odd, you are foreign, you are soft-handed, but for tonight, you are one of them. Or at least, you know someone who tripped over a pig. The night rolls on, and with it, the volume keeps ratcheting up. What starts as spirited debate over whose cow truly wandered further from home tips easily into full-throated shouting. Voices tangle together, challenge and boast, insult and laughter, echoing off soot-streaked beams. The room's natural temperature rises by several degrees, powered by bodies, spilled ale, and opinions aired at maximum setting. A commotion over in the corner attracts the room's attention. Two men, both trying to claim the same chipped tankard, begin the ancient, slow ritual of standing up too quickly and bumping into each other with just enough force to call it a fight. Shoving leads to swaying. A third party wades in, possibly thinking this is a group dance. And now half the bench goes sliding sideways, mugs clattering to the sticky floor. Someone yells encouragement, but you can barely see which side they are on. Amid all this, a would-be musician perches on a stool with a lute. It is unclear if he has ever practiced, or if the lute is mostly ornamental. He plucks out a tune of such heroic uncertainty that even the local goat seems disturbed. The crowd groans and shouts for different songs, their requests growing more creative, anything to tempt the player off that stool. Instead, he doubles down, strumming harder. The melody, if you can call it that, wobbles in and out of tune, inspiring a mostly rhythmic stomping that sounds like furniture being moved upstairs during an earthquake. Just then, someone's empty mug skids across your path, missing your knee by the slim margin usually reserved for magicians' tricks and sheer cosmic luck. You realize you have been pressing yourself flatter and flatter against the wall, as though wishing yourself into the stone. A stale biscuit follows, hurled by a woman aiming for the brawlers, but landing squarely in a bowl of turnip soup. The crowd cheers. The brawlers pause only briefly to consider dinner, then get back to the important business of knocking elbows and pride. A table near you begins to list heavily. Oh, the wide, wet hush of dawn in the Hokkaido forest, a land where the trees breathe in slow constellations of mist, and the ground below moss and undergrowth is as soft as memory. Here begins the song. Here, on a narrow slope washed in pale blue shadow, Kiyoshi listens, ear pressed to the earth, for the cadence that echoes deeper than roots. He is neither a small boy nor yet a man, 20 years old, lean with the cautious hope of youth, muscles tensed against the cold, and heart gathering what time the world will still allow. The village lies shrouded by fog. Peaked thatched roofs sag beneath the weight of silence. Smoke curls from the cooking fires, rising like offerings to the implacable sky. It is the hour before lessons, before the imperial bell tolls, when Kiyoshi's grandmother, Yi, old as wind-worn birch and twice as resolute, summons him to the hearth where the drum sits. Shrouded in deer hide and stories, she unwraps it gently. A frame drum, rim of alder wood, surface weathered as her hands. Every scar on its skin marks a prayer. For good salmon runs, for gentle winters, for the fierce protection of a people dissolving day by day on the tide of a state intent on annulment. Her voice is low, a river running beneath snow, shaped by long years of endurance. We have a rhythm the officials do not hear, Yi murmurs. Listen, Kiyo. She places the drum across his lap, stretches his fingers wide. The first beat is gentle, tentative, a question tapped softly against wood. Another joins, then a third, until the room's darkness is mapped in quiet thunder. Each vibration settles into Kiyoshi's bones, memory lodging itself deep as marrow. But outside, order strains to intrude. The mainland school looms at the edge of the forest, all straight lines and new cement, banners bright with the flag and slogans. There, children are pressed into language lessons that twist the Ainu tongue into silence. Culture hangs on the edge of disuse, as teachers insist always on obedience and erasure. Kiyoshi's mother, Aiko, sits across the room, wringing her hands in her lap. Each morning, the communal dread seeps into her movements, a fear not merely of what will be lost, but of what will be forcibly forgotten. She remembers the night the officials arrived, bearing their decrees, that the drum is superstition, that the children must learn civility, that only standardized words belong in their mouths. Her husband has retreated into weary acquiescence, eyes dark with unshed regret. But Kiyoshi wonders, does the world truly change because men say so? The woods beyond the village have not learned this script. The foxes and cranes, the river tracing lazy bounds through willow, the snow, when it comes in heavy silence. They move to music unchanged by the edicts of city men in boots. Kiyoshi, too, would live by this pattern, guarding what can be held, even as he learns kanji and bows too low before the teacher's desk. He drums in the pre-dawn, Yi's hands guiding his rhythm, small, delicate corrections that mean more than lectures. When he closes his eyes, it is not his own face he sees, but a procession of ancestors, dancers, singers, fishermen, every drumbeat an invocation. This is not bravery, but necessity, a heartbeat against the hush, lest the pattern unravel entirely. He dares not bring the drum to school. There, surrounded by slogans chalked on blackboards, harmony, progress, unity, he is called by his Japanese name, all traces of Ainu ground away beneath a shining discipline. Still, his fingers ache to tap desk and thigh, to shape silence into pulse. Even in submission, his quiet rebellion persists, the old rhythms whispered beneath his breath, a fugitive song stitched between the lines of recitation. His parents' fear is palpable, something lived rather than spoken. Kiyoshi feels its chill every time the postman's bicycle clinks up the lane with more pamphlets, more reminders of the world's shifting shape. Yet against this, the drum's echo throbs, unkillable, a secret inheritance. In the long blue moments before school, while the tea simmers and the embers fade, Kiyoshi's longing for continuity, some shape of the past that might endure, sings softly inside him, impossible to stamp out, each day more urgent, and so life narrows. Between the lessons and the drum, between public obedience and private echo, Kiyoshi stands poised, knowing that every drumbeat could be forbidden by noon, could vanish forever if the right ears overhear. Yet he plays on, carrying the rhythm into the world's indifferent light, one palm's hush after another. The forest, the family, and the last drum, all teeter on the same edge, trembling into the future, hoping the memory holds. Under the hollow glare of school lights, Kiyoshi holds himself inside an invisible cocoon. The uniform's starched seams pinch. The air here is thin with enforced conformity, a brittle pressure building beneath every lesson. The morning's drumbeat, still pulsing in his hands though they rest idle on the desk, becomes a private thrum, a whisper far deeper than the rote memorization of imperial dates or honorific syllables. His classmates, Ainu and Wajin alike, drift on islets of isolation, each face stilled by the same uncertain wariness. Teachers observe from behind angular spectacles, eyes skimming over those who might resist, searching for errant gestures or stray words from the forbidden tongue. Kiyoshi repeats the new sounds, lips careful on foreign vowels. Each phrase he learns is a substitute for a word lost, each character written an act of necessity. Inside, he feels the space left behind, a vacancy that no textbook can close. On the wall above the blackboard, the emperor's portrait hangs. Stern, pale, untouchable, a symbol of an unreachable order enforced with gentle, unrelenting hands. Sometimes Kiyoshi wonders whether, in some distant city, these men believe their version of progress can truly saturate the forest's roots, or if they sleep uneasily, haunted by old songs they cannot quite erase. At recess, he finds the edge of the yard, where the fence surrenders to wild tangles of bamboo. Here, the wind gathers in low moans. Kiyoshi presses a palm to the earth, feeling for the shape of vibration, the memory his grandmother shaped with every crackle of her fire. The land does not forget its people, he thinks. In a moment alone, he sketches drum rhythms on the dirt with his finger, quiet as a prayer, wishing, just for a moment, that the ground might answer back. When school ends, the world unspools itself with sudden length. Sunlight caught in branch shadows, the air thick with the scent of drying leaves and distant shorelines. Older boys jeer at him, sometimes flinging stones, sometimes just words, made sharper by the knowledge of shared exclusion. They too have grown wary and brittle in the crucible of daily discipline, wary of provoking the teachers or their own aching sense of difference. Kiyoshi, moving silent along the margins, hears the drum in their footsteps, knows their anger as a muted echo of the fear all their families carry. Home, the house and hearth offer a transitory calm. Grandmother Yi waits, stooped but expectant, a constellation of age spots tracked across her knuckles. She reads the subtle lines in Kiyoshi's posture and gestures for him to sit. As dusk thickens, they do not speak directly of suffering. Instead, she tends to the drum, her routine one of simple reverence. When she plays, her rhythm is slower, almost hesitant, as if feeling for a pulse in danger of vanishing. On these evenings, Kiyoshi listens, fully, openly, committing the sound's shape to memory before words or wood can desert him. Aiko hovers nearby, her silence a form of caution, eyes moving from mother to son to the gap above the door. There are stories of raids, of confiscated instruments, of families whose names are no longer spoken. This is the real lesson, sharper than any schoolbook. The survival of a people is measured in what endures quietly, in secret, in rooms shuttered against the world's reach. Kiyoshi does not ask Yi for tales of her youth. He knows that to her, every retelling is a kind of wound, and there is love in this restraint. On moonless nights, Kiyoshi walks to the river's edge. Cold water glitters between stones, and the sky above is a fretwork of branches and scattered stars. He drums with bare hands on frozen logs, each strike a question thrown into darkness. Is there anyone left, beyond sight or memory, to catch the echo? Sometimes he imagines the ancestors gathering close, silently watching as he rehearses these gestures for no audience but himself. Other evenings, the silence itself feels suspiciously heavy, as if even the night listens for evidence of disobedient continuity. In these hours, Kiyoshi's longing shifts from defiance to a more plaintive wish, not just to preserve the instrument, but to keep its meaning alive, to transmit some resonance across the chasm opening beneath his generation. He studies the shapes his fingers make, tracing shadowy patterns, wondering how long a single drumbeat can last against the weight of new laws and the hush of collective fear. Yet despite everything, the rhythm persists, soft, uncertain, but present, a stubborn phrase just beneath silence, yearning to outlast forgetting. The season turns, and Hokkaido wears its deepest winter. Snow descends in slow, determined veils, the island muffled by a stillness both isolating and tender. In the white hush, footsteps vanish almost as soon as they appear, and the cold presses against the walls of Kiyoshi's home as if eager to sift memory from all it finds within. Yet, even as drifts grow along the roofs and deer move closer to the boundaries of the human world, another kind of urgency settles. Traditions are more vulnerable now, as if old customs, too, might be lost beneath the mounting whiteness. Within the cramped warmth of Yi's cottage, the drum is hidden more carefully, wrapped in extra cloth and tucked beneath mats when not in use. The family eats in near silence, hands close to the fire for comfort, their conversations reduced to gestures, the basic economy of affection and necessity. Sometimes, when Kiyoshi returns home from school through snow that dazzles so fiercely it burns the eye, he sees in the village an odd duality. A community outwardly compliant, stocking up on imperial calendars and singing the state's New Year songs, while, beneath the routines, old alliances continue in private glances, fleeting exchanges, the passing of an herb or story beneath the hush of frost-laden eaves. On a night thick with snow, Yi draws Kiyoshi close. The kerosene lamp flickers, amber halo carved deep into shadow. She holds her drum in her lap and hands him a strip of deer sinew. He watches her wrist-string one edge, her hands steady despite the ache of age. "Nothing in our lives is made to last alone," she murmurs. "But together, even these simple tools hold the shape of us." She teaches him new patterns, fewer in number as the months pass, but grown richer with the weight of time. The rhythms are different now, darker, more contemplative, like the winter river beneath ice. Yi's teaching becomes increasingly silent, relying on the mutual understanding between their hands, the way pressure and timing can shift the meaning of a beat, the way the air between drum and heart is crowded with everything left unsaid. Meanwhile, Kiyoshi's days at school grow more brittle. Gloves stiff with cold, he files in line with classmates over packed snow to recite pledges in voices rendered flat by obligation. The teachers have grown stricter. A rumor, like winter wind, travels through the halls. A neighbor's house was inspected, a carved idol taken, a few family names removed from the school roster. Each notice posted in the corridor brims with warnings: what not to keep, what not to say, which games and songs are now forbidden. Their authority seeps into every unguarded corner, crystallizing as a kind of frost upon the soul. One day, returning from errands, Kiyoshi's fingers raw from the market's chill, he sees a trio of older men in formal coats standing at the far end of the lane. They speak quietly with his father, their tone grave, gestures practiced. Kiyoshi stiffens, watching from a narrow vantage, tension pooled in his gut. The discussion soon disperses into the murk. His father, face ashen, returns home gripping a small pamphlet, a new set of rules, lines he must not cross, reminders of trust's fragility. That evening, anxiety cracks the household's surface. Kiyoshi overhears Aiko and his father arguing in soft undertones, their words slipping into silences heavy with frustration. The threat is real, immediate. Household searches are imminent. There is talk of what to hide, what to destroy if need be. Yi listens, silent. At last she gestures for Kiyoshi to follow her into the shed, torchlight glinting against old tools and drying fish. She places the drum in his hands, its surface cold as stone. Her eyes, small and fierce, meet his. "You must remember," she says, voice unyielding, "not just the sound, but the shape, the way it lives in your hands. They can take the thing, but not how you make it." The night stretches long. Kiyoshi, unable to sleep, sits by a window rimmed with tidal frost, turning the drum over in his lap. He examines each seam and knot, tracing lines where his grandmother and ancestors shaped wood and hide into something that could call the forest close, summon spirits, bind grief to hope. He beats it quietly, the rhythm slow, muffled by blankets. In that resonant hush, snow sifts steadily outside, a pale world sleeping while inside. He preserves the invisible pattern knowingly, desperately. With dawn, the snow ceases and stillness sharpens. Over breakfast, there is no need for words. The family shares a look heavy as iron. In Kiyoshi's chest, beneath the weight of uncertainty, he feels the drumbeat change, now not only a song of remembrance, but of vigilant expectation. Each sound is newly precious, a code passed down in secret, made holy by the threat of its imminent vanishing. The resonance survives, for now, in the hush of winter, nested in snow and silence, awaiting the trial that must come. As late winter ripens toward an ashen spring, the world outside Kiyoshi's door again begins to stir, no longer muffled but eager, jangling, uncertain. The snow recedes in sorry clumps, and beneath it emerges the battered skeleton of last year's life, sticks, roots, and the stubborn flare of wild mint, pale green against the gloom. In these wan mornings, something quietly unyielding returns to the village, a sense of restless watchfulness threaded across meager gatherings and wordless meals. The sense that time, like water beneath the thaw, cannot be perfectly contained. With the easing of the frost, government inspectors grow bolder in their patrols. Their boots press patterns into the muddy roads near the edge of the forest, trailing warnings that now seem to whisper through the air itself. Kiyoshi has learned to read the world by its absences. Laughter dwindling, conversations clipped into pieces, neighbors now careful with every greeting, as if an old friend might be recording every syllable. Even the birds seem to quiet when the officials pass. Yet rebellion in this season is not a single act, but the patient persistence of detail. At dusk, Kiyoshi gathers with two cousins and an old fisherman's daughter beneath a willow at the river bend. They do not bring instruments or raise voices. They play rocks along smoothed roots, hum into their coat collars, watch the ripples bearing the sky's brief gold. Kiyoshi taps rhythms against his hip, silent yet precise, passing phrases to his companions in the coded language of the nearly erased. Each pattern is a reminder, we are still here. Their rebellion is as much endurance as defiance, a tenacity that lives across pauses and glances, and the thrilling ache of not being entirely alone. Rumors drift into the village. In distant settlements, a festival drum was found and burned, a singer's name struck from the records, apprentices conscripted into state-sanctioned labor far from their birthplaces. Sharp news, muffled as it arrives, crawls through the village like chill fog, sowing doubt among the oldest and stoking the restless hunger of the young. Kiyoshi's friends urge caution, but inside he feels something gathering, a need to mark a line, to prove, if only for a fleeting minute, that their history cannot be so easily dispatched. That night, Yi finds Kiyoshi alone by the hearth, carving a strip of alder with trembling hands. She does not scold. Instead, she shares a secret. How, in her own youth, she once danced the bear-sending ritual at the edge of forbidden flame. Her voice is soft, barely a vibration, but her gaze is luminous. Sorrow only wins if you allow it to become silence. There is courage in her words, more than in any open resistance, a faith that memory is itself a form of action. The following week, a child disappears, not taken, but sent away, to a boarding school meant to erase wildness and sand the dialect from tongue and heart. The village mourns in fractured silence, too wary for ceremony, too proud for tears. Kiyoshi watches this loss settle upon everyone. Even the earth seems to sag. Yet out of this shared ache grows a resolve. During a thinning rain, he and his friends meet again. Riskier now, they know, but they bring with them what tools they dare: wooden spoons, an overturned pot, a hollow log dragged by moonlight from the edge of the wood. The sky above is turbulent, rimmed by distant lightning. For the first time, Kiyoshi dares to let the beat sound aloud, palms on the makeshift drum, gentle at first, then stronger. The others join swiftly, a chorus stitched from longing and refusal. The rhythm they gather is not old, not Yi's. It is new, sharply syncopated, a chorus of disruption and survival. Their faces are rapt, hearts straining with the thrill of voicing what has been suppressed. For a brief, trembling interval, the night is not governed by mandates and caution, but illuminated by the pulse of collective will. It is not a festival. There are no songs, no spirits conjured, but the sound ripples angrily outward, announcing itself to the field and the forest beyond, as if daring those who listen to name it or erase it. This rebellion is not a call to arms, but a refusal to be stilled, a seed sown in defiance beneath persistent rain. Afterwards, the group disperses, nervous laughter breaking what remains of the tension. Someone has seen a lantern swing in the distance, perhaps a neighbor, perhaps worse. Each melts back into shadow and home, hearts hammering, the echoes of the rhythm still surging in their blood. Kiyoshi, walking alone, feels the world pulse with new possibility, fragile, ambivalent, but undeniable. At home, Yi meets him with a silent nod that brims with understanding. They do not risk words. They share only a glance, thick with all that cannot be confessed. For the first time, Kiyoshi senses that the rhythm of their resistance is no longer solitary. Against the tide of erasure, they have drummed something new into the night, brief, small, but durable as the memory of a fire glimmering through damp wood. The world for another day holds space for the last drum, and all who listen nervously, hungrily, to its call. Days lengthen. The spring sun strains through new leaves, painting dapples on the muddy lanes. Hokkaido, patient beneath its trials, begins to pulse with the delicate abundance of renewal. Jonquils flicker gold near the riverbank, and magpies weave uncertain songs from thicket to thicket. In this fragile season, the pressures upon Kiyoshi's world do not relent, but the air itself feels subtly altered. Possibility slips like pollen through what once felt impermeable. In the village, families mend nets and patch walls. Men gather by the communal oven, voices wary, eyes sharp. Yet within the cracks of routine, a different energy thrums. Quiet reunions, ostensibly for sharing tools or tending the sick, become moments of covert exchange. seeds of knowledge pressed hand to hand, a recipe, a phrase, a line of song hummed so softly it lives only in breath. Strength emerges in communion. The young learn to listen beyond words, attentive to the silent grammar of resilience. Kiyoshi finds himself recognized, if not openly honored, for his steadiness, his willingness to risk small gestures for the sake of the past, threading into now. Yi weakens, her vigor dimming even as the days grow warm. Sometimes Kiyoshi finds her at the threshold, half in sun, half in shadow, her gaze fixed on a place only she can see. She no longer drums herself, but instead offers gentle counsel. "The drum was never meant to be loud," she murmurs one evening, hands trembling over his. "It is meant to gather us, to call us back when the world is determined to scatter." He sits beside her, sunlight splintering in the windowpane, and listens, more intently than ever, as she teaches him what cannot be codified: how to see wind in the grass, how to mark time by the tilt of a heron's neck, how to sense, in emptiness, the echo of all that came before. Word arrives of another household searched, a family sent south with little warning. Men's voices gather with fresh urgency in the evenings, their plans an anxious counterpoint to the official decrees read aloud in the square. Kiyoshi's father struggles between compliance and indignation, his silences deepening with each passing notice. Yet Kiyoshi grows into his inheritance, assuming quiet authority. The drum's hiding place shifts again, wrapped in new cloth, the secret known only to him and Yi. The village is made smaller by fear, but also bound closer. At dusk, a handful of youths gather under pretense, repairing fences, tending goats. Yet always, eventually, forging a ring where old wisdom circulates fresh and sharp. Kiyoshi does not always lead, but when he does, his rhythms are simpler, more spacious. Each tap a question, each silence an invitation. The others learn by watching, by mimicry and suggestion, not declaration. Sometimes, one will begin a phrase, a different rhythm, or a remembered lyric, and it is picked up and passed hand to hand, a thread in the invisible fabric stretched across the gathering dark. When a brief truce falls over the land, inspectors busy elsewhere or perhaps only lulled by the constant, minor dramas of rural life. The river glimmers silver, frogs trill from hidden banks, and the village dares a muted sort of celebration. Food is shared, stories loosely told. In the half-light, Kiyoshi brings out the drum, not loudly, not at the circle's heart, but cradled closely, sound muffled beneath his palm. It is not performance, but invocation, a murmur offered to the air as if to remind the gods and ghosts alike, we are not entirely lost. Yi's final days are gentle. She drifts between sleep and waking, sometimes smiling faintly at a story retold, sometimes squeezing Kiyoshi's hand in wordless approval. When, at last, she slips away, her passing is marked quietly. There is no drum at the funeral. The elders nod gravely, eyes shining, as if understanding the shape of restraint surviving within austerity. That night, Kiyoshi sits outside, wind cool against his cheek, drum nestled between his knees. The village is motionless, shadow-wrapped, save the distant bark of a fox. He does not drum aloud. Instead, he feels the instrument's weight and silence, recognizing in both the marrow of all he has inherited. After, life shifts again. Aiko, mournful but dignified, keeps the house. His father's anger settles into a wary care. Kiyoshi moves through the days with a new gravity, his gestures imbued With the deliberate grace of a custodian, he continues his studies, tending both scripted lessons and those older, more essential, each day a negotiation. A balancing of identities wound ever tighter by necessity, sometimes in odd places, a corridor's hush, an open window, a call to the fields. He catches an echo, a low rhythm traveling on wind, too faint to name, enduring despite all. So the legacy endures, not as proclamation or public rite, but as a current woven through days and gestures. In every quiet morning, in every shared glance, in every soft tap, whether upon knee or table or heart, the last drum's presence lingers, a faith passed furtively, stubborn as the wind that combs the Hokkaido grass, impossible to corral or subdue. Out in the open, life bends to the new order, but beneath, in the hush between words, lives the pulse of all that history could not erase. Each morning, the world arrived in Layla's hands as a whiteness, a waiting, taut anticipation. The blank parchment, edges curling in the early Istanbul breeze, accepted her hesitant touch with a forgiveness that felt ancient. From the high casement window of the Imperial Eightley, the workshop whose walls had harbored generations of her kin, one could gaze across the city's tiled roofs and shifting tides of the Bosphorus, eastward toward the faint ghost of Asia. Yet Layla kept her eyes low, to the concentric rings of her ink, to the delicate tremor of her nib as she coaxed the world into imagined lines. Cartography, the art her ancestors once practiced with an imperial reverence, was in the blood plate of Layla's family. Her grandfather's thick-fingered hands had arched over this same table. His voice, hushed and precise, had soothed her childhood with tales of oceans crossed and mountains measured, with stories of sultans who traced the empire's skin in ever-sprawling arabesques. Her mother, too, had labored in these rooms, her calluses a quiet defiance, proof that a woman could shape the boundaries of empire, if not its politics. But now, the room pressed inward. Dust softened the once vivid carpets. The great globe in the corner spun rarely. Its colors faded like old bruises. The apprentices' seats, once crowded with sharp-eyed youths, were fewer. Laughter, once inseparable from the sound of quills, had diminished to polite silence, or the weary sigh of men whose best techniques had grown obsolete. In the gathering gloom, Sultan Abdulhamid's portrait watched, distant, immutable, but still demanding perfection. Amidst this elegy of fading craft, Layla was the youngest, the most tenacious. Her maps gleamed with an intimacy that no cold apparatus could rival. The hand-drawn lattice of a city quarter, each street shaded with a memory or longing. The blue, hand-ground and lustrous, describing inexact coastlines as if dreaming them forward. She loved the moment when contours and names bled together, as if the act of naming could stave off oblivion. Her pulse quickened at the touch of compasses, the feel of bone-handle rulers passed down through generations. Yet beyond the carved wooden doors, a new wind unsettled the capital. The empire's engineers, fresh from Paris and Vienna, spoke of theodolites and trigonometric surveys, of maps produced by machines, with a precision unclouded by artistry or nostalgia. In meetings and salons, Layla heard the words efficiency, modernization, rationality, the future, like stones tossed into her tranquil, inky pool. Even her master, venerable Master Magyar, had begun permitting foreign wax tablets, and unfamiliar lattices of numbers into the atelier, his fingers trembling as he introduced the apparatus, with the practiced neutrality of a man surrendering territory he had cherished most of his life. At home, Layla witnessed the refracted worry in her mother's silence. Their small apartment above the spice merchant's shop felt newly vulnerable. Conversations, once lively with news of voyages and commissions, were cut short when unfamiliar footsteps passed below. The fear was simple, almost plebeian. When the Sultan's ministers no longer prized hand-drawn maps, what would become of the families whose livelihood had, for centuries, transformed ink into empire? Still, with dusk filtering through the window in pale ochre layers, Layla retreated to her drawings. Each evening, her lamp cast the workshop in golden halos, and the slow, rhythmic motion of her brush, curving along riverbanks, dotting unnamed villages, became both prayer and rebellion. She could feel, somewhere outside the rhythm of the city's call to prayer, a horizon closing. Yet she answered it with ink, inscribing her hope where continents met the sea, and where the old order's fading light succumbed to the precise, impersonal glow of the new. Tonight, Layla's latest map, a commission for a minor provincial governor, lay half-finished before her. The order was bureaucratic, its language terse. It asked only for boundaries and roads, and for the new European scale to be observed. Yet at the page's edge, Layla allowed herself a small transgression. A copse of imagined cypress trees, rendered in flowing script, where none had been surveyed. For in that refusal to become nothing but a scribe for power, she found a slender thread of freedom, haunting and fragile as the first silver moon on the Bosphorus. Unseen, she smiled. The empire's boundaries might shift, but her map, for one evening more, would bear the imprint of her hand, her lineage, and her quietly stubborn soul. The seasons edged forward, and with each passing week, the atelier's air thickened, not with ink, but with foreboding. Layla observed as Master Magyar carried his uncertainty like a fine crack across porcelain, sometimes invisible, sometimes refracting bitter light. New edicts echoed through the vaulted halls, spoken by visiting officials in foreign-cut coats who carried watch chains and spoke more French than Turkish. Their words were heavy with transformation, yet empty of the tenderness that once bound this sacred craft to the human scale. Layla moved within these halls, as if tracing both her ancestry and a vanishing path. On cold, clear mornings, she sought solace in the map archive, shelves bowing under the accumulated years, rolled sheaves bound with fraying cords, the old wax stamps of distant provinces long since lost to war or negotiation. Layla's hands caressed the vellum, fingers brushing margins crowded with annotations. Whispers of debates long stilled or arguments over the course of a stream winding through some mountain village. Here, past cartographers existed as ghosts, subtle voices, guiding her thumb along smudges of lapis indigo, or surprising her with the scent of ink and rosewater pressed between sheets that bore her family's initials. But outside this refuge, reform was no longer gentle. The empire's need for order and uniformity crept through the veins of the palace, outpacing the slumbering rituals of Layla's world. Exotic machines arrived in the courtyard, borne by porters in livery. Brass instruments gleaming with the cold certainty of geometry, their cases inscribed with foreign alphabets. Apprentices were summoned in clusters, their eager questions swallowed by explanations that came not in stories, but in numbers and instructions, precise and unyielding. Layla tried to follow, taking notes in her cramped script beside measures and meridians, but the lessons floated at a distance, a language of angles rather than of lands remembered. Master Magyar watched these changes with a mixture of resignation and defiance. In private, his voice softened as he spoke to Layla, as if imparting some last inheritance. He showed her the ancient atlas leather cover faded to dull sepia, corners worn buttery by centuries of hands. Each page was a tapestry of speculation and care, a rendering of not just space, but of the world's breadth and mystery. A map, he whispered, is always a confession. It reveals what we choose to know and what we choose to dream. But there was little room for confession now. A commission arrived for a new survey of the empire's western border. The order was direct, every detail to align with the latest European coordinates. No embellishment, no invention. The threat hung unspoken. Failure to comply would bring replacement, perhaps even closure, for the entire atelier. The news fell like winter rain, unrelenting and cold. The elder apprentices murmured among themselves, voices sharpened by anxiety. Some had already made plans, seeking work as draftsmen in burgeoning ministries, or courting foreign engineers who cared little for the genealogy of Ottoman mapmaking. Layla felt these departures as absences she could not mend, gaps in the tapestry where familiar threads grew thin and vanished. Even the familiar creak of the atelier's old bell sounded strangely forlorn, as if announcing the end of an era. Layla's mother watched her daughters resolve from afar, holding faith in silence. At night, they shared simple meals beneath lantern light. The spices of their soup hung in the air, binding the present to childhood memories. Some evenings, her mother's stories drifted back, of the Blue Edge world, of maps slipped to couriers at midnight, of borders that had defied the Empire's own certainty. Layla listened, uncertain whether to hope or mourn. Their future had grown indivisibly tangled with the fate of the old workshop, and the vanishing world it stubbornly inked into being. The summons came in the form of a folded parchment, stamped and ominous. Layla and Master Magyar were to oversee the Western Survey, working alongside a team of engineers who tolerated handwork as artifact, not necessity. On the eve of departure, Layla packed her satchel, notebook, tools, a slender silver compass that had once belonged to her mother. Beneath her clothes, she pressed a single sheet from her family's secret atlas, an ancient, half-mythical rendering of the Empire, unfaithful to reality, vibrant with places that never were. She kept it close, a talisman of what mapping could mean if allowed to speak beyond accuracy. When dawn came, Istanbul unfolded in the clear, unhurried hush of a city before its townspeople awoke. Layla and her master climbed into the waiting carriage, leaving behind the familiar tapestries and gridded windows of the atelier. As the first call to prayer scattered across the rooftops and crows wheeled over the Bosphorus, Layla stared out at the trembling horizon, the world to be measured, revised, perhaps erased. The atlas was in flux, and she, unwilling, was being swept up in the storm. The countryside unfolded before Layla in long, mutable lines, olive groves dipping over low hills, poplar trees trembling in the dusk, streams tracing their secret courses as the carriage pressed deeper into the provinces. Istanbul's haze fell away behind them, replaced by air spiced with wild thyme, carrying the rough songs of distant herders. The landscapes she had so often charted in miniature now stretched immense and unconstrained on every side, a world neither parchment nor policy could hold entirely within its frame. The engineers who met them at the staging post, young, brisk men in stiff uniforms, eyed Layla and Master Majar with thinly veiled amusement. Their world was rods, chains, and theodolites. The precision of mathematics was their poetry. They explained, without malice, that the survey must proceed to the most recent European standards. Their appointment was not so much a collaboration as a concession to tradition. Layla, standing among their stacked crates, felt the weight of her family's calling reduced, like a relic offered for display behind glass. Their days descended into storyless routine. Fields were measured, angles calculated, triangulations plotted with indifferent expertise. Majar, dignified but weary, drifted to the fringes, offering polite suggestions that were half ignored. Layla moved quietly through the encampment, watching as lines and numbers multiplied on the engineers' ledgers, abstracting the earth, flattening the meandering footpaths and intimate valleys into a diagram of compliance. Her solace was the evening itself. At twilight, when duty gave way to fatigue, she slipped through the quiet hamlets along their route. She sat by village wells, watched old women teasing wool or young boys setting traps along streams. The villagers welcomed her with gentle suspicion, offering ripe figs, a place by the fire, fragments of stories handed down generations. In exchange, Layla listened. She heard of vanished springs, trees planted by lovers now dust, disputes over fields whose boundaries no instrument had ever rightfully known. Their maps, the ones drawn on memory and spoken fears, were absent from any government commission. Yet in the flicker of lanterns on mud walls, Layla glimpsed the living soul of the empire, persistent even beneath the weight of reform. Each story became a silent addition to the atlas hidden against her skin. She drew sketches in her secret notebook, careful not to disturb the ordered lines of official reports. With each page, Layla felt her vocation transform from obedience to preservation. If no sultan denied the world's human heart, no machine would erase it, so long as someone gathered its evidence, inked quietly by lamp glow. One evening, after the engineers retired, she lingered at the edge of a vineyard. The sky bloomed violet, scattered with the first attentive stars. From behind the abandoned press, an old woman appeared, her shawl patterned in the colors of earth. She eyed Layla's satchel knowingly, her voice brittle but unhurried. "You are the scribe's daughter, aren't you? My mother once showed your mother where the river splits in two." The recognition startled Layla. Here, in anonymity, her family's lineage reached. The woman pressed a folded slip of cloth into Layla's palm, a rough sketch, smudged charcoal and stained. "Take it. The path is older than the Sultan's. Some maps keep us alive, even when empires do not." Layla thanked her, heart knotted with both humility and purpose. That night, under the thin canopy of her tent, she compared the old sketch with her own notes and the map she was contracted to compose. There were discrepancies, hollows, hidden fords, a route through reeds marked only in the villagers' recollection. She felt herself drawn into a hidden dialogue, one world mapped by authority, another by endurance and faith. An idea began to emerge, a map not for display or decree, but as a secret inheritor's record, layered beneath the sanctioned certainties. She would create her commissioned chart, minute with lines and numbers to appease her overseers. But threaded beneath it, coded in veiled symbols and near-invisible ciphers, Layla would inscribe the landscape's afterlife, wells long forgotten by officials, gathering places beloved and imperiled, paths overtaken by new boundaries, yet still walked at dawn by those who remembered. Her task grew urgent and immense, driven less by the compulsion to please than by the need to witness and safeguard. Ink became a quiet rebellion, a bridge between worlds too easily sundered by decree. Each night, as her lantern cast shifting patterns on tent canvas, Layla inscribed another layer upon her hidden map. Over the weeks, unmarked tributaries and lost villages reappeared, alive in miniature, awaiting a day when someone, in another uncertain dawn, might need to remember more than geometry could ever hold. Day by gradual day, the survey advanced, and the boundaries of the empire's western province began to resolve, paper-thin, absolute in their clarity. Yet increasingly divorced from the lived realities they sought to define. The air above the encampment, once marked by the scent of wood smoke and harvest, grew colder and clipped, mirroring the brisk discipline with which the engineers tabulated their results. Figures poured in from every meridian, forming a latticework of rational lines. Orders for the final rendering arrived, terse and unyielding, leaving little room for poetry or the patient ambiguity of the old craft. Layla paced the perimeter of the new territory. Where her companions saw features to be surveyed and measured, she discerned the subtle thresholds, a stone cairn left by a forgotten ancestor, the trembling silence by a stand of trees reserved for prayer, the soft hollow at a fork where lost children were found. These details, invisible in the bright daylight of administrative reason, haunted her evenings. As dusk surrendered to the hush of crickets and the faint, repetitive song of an owl perched nearby, Layla's lamp would glow again. Her brush wove careful filigrees on her clandestine parchment, not in defiance of the state, but in honor of human continuity. Hers was an archiving of recollection against the anonymizing tide of the present. Opposition, quiet but sharpened by necessity, resonated through Layla's fingertips. She realized she was not crafting a mere artifact, but rather a thread linking past to possible future. Nights slipped by with steady urgency as she embedded subtleties into the commissioned map, shadings along a creek bed indicating its hidden fork, a series of dots curling near a copse, known to shepherds, but absent from the engineer's gaze. Her master, Mausoleum Majar, kept watchful silence, sometimes pausing at her shoulder to offer a nod no witness would register. He, too, understood what lay at stake, that maps, if left too bare, left their people adrift in their own homeland. One evening, as the survey neared its conclusion, news reached the camp. In Istanbul, reforms had redoubled, more ateliers shuttered, their archives seized by state decree. Stories filtered westward of artisans dismissed, of tools auctioned, and library volumes carted away like old wares. The imperial city itself seemed to have grown wary of memory, intent on smoothing every jagged margin in the name of efficiency and order. Layla walked the camp's edge that night, watching oil lamps glint across the fields, feeling both far from home and more intimately tethered to its vanishing shape. The final day of the survey arrived with no ceremony. Layla submitted her map to the engineers, a crisply rendered chart annotated in flawless script, its gridwork as crisp as the formulas that underpinned it. There was no comment on her flourishes. Her coded embellishments, skillfully subdued, drew no suspicion. The engineers conferred, stamped the map with their seal, and sent it by fast courier to Istanbul. With their contract fulfilled, the team prepared their departure. Magyar, the lines of his face drawn but his bearing resolute, gathered his few belongings and turned to Layla with a look both proud and resigned. "It survives," he said quietly. "What matters is we have left a record, not just of places, but of the wisdom that built them." The final night in camp was marked by a gentle gathering at the fireside. For once, the talk drifted to stories rather than figures, each voice, including Layla's, carrying notes of longing and tentative hope. They spoke of routes obscured by the coming railways, of wells that would soon be capped or forgotten, of children whose sense of place would grow thin in the shadow of transformation. No consensus formed about what should or could be preserved, but woven into the dusk was an acknowledgement that loss could be softened by remembrance, if not forestalled altogether. At dawn, Layla and Magyar departed the encampment, their footsteps muffled and slow. The world around them seemed both unchanged and newly fragile. In her satchel, Layla cradled her illicit record, a living map stitched together from the land's memory, just as surely as the sanctioned documents weighed down the engineer's saddlebags. Only now did she grasp the fullness of her responsibility, not merely to her craft or her lineage, but to all who might someday seek to reclaim what was being so quickly overwritten. As she and Magyar walked eastward, a light rain began to fall, dappling the dust and tracing invisible rivers down every path. Layla lifted her face to the cool baptism of morning, feeling time, for the briefest instant, fold open, a map not of land, but of possibility, unrolling quietly before her feet. With measured resolve, she stepped forward, carrying tomorrow's atlas inside her, layered and alive, waiting to find its place in the ungovernable heart of the world. Istanbul's spires materialized on the horizon, silvered in the late sun, as Layla and Magyar returned, changed but outwardly the same, through the winding arteries of the city's edge. The old imperial district churned with unfamiliar rhythms, processions of officials threaded through the markets, new telegraph lines cut between domes, and the faces of those who once belonged to the Guild of Mapmakers were more often turned downward, lips sealed against hopes once shared aloud. The grand atelier, with its fretwork screens and low, fragrant shelves, greeted them like a melancholy echo. Quiet remained in every stone, and yet an undercurrent of expectancy vibrated beneath the silence, as if the building itself hoped some part of its legacy might yet be rescued from the undertow. Layla paused by the entry, her hand on the lintel, recalling the gentle abrasions of childhood, her nails tracing the swirling script carved by ancestors, whose touch lived on here in quiet graffiti. It was Magyar who entered first, his gait definite, body weathered but purposeful. The remaining clerks, those who had stayed behind to catalog what lingered, glanced up with thin relief. They brought news. More workshops had closed. The Sultanic Bureau was consolidating its archives, and foreign cartographers now commanded entire districts with their efficient, impersonal forms. Rumors and lists passed through the remaining staff like shared breath. Magyar busied himself with sorting instruments, masking the tension that threaded his voice. Layla drifted between memory and the day's demands, slipping at moments into the shadowed alcove she had claimed in her girlhood. There she unwrapped her hidden map, now nearly translucent at the margins from repeated folding, its surface crosshatched with layers only she could fully decipher. She looked at it as one might look at a palimpsest, reading not just what was present, but the faint, indelible traces of what had once been and what might return. Word came that a foreign commission was to tour the atelier, seeking artifacts for a museum exhibit. Layla felt the chill of finality in the air, a sense that the spaces she moved through might tomorrow be locked, artifacts displayed behind uncomprehending glass, each tool severed from the lineage it was meant to serve. As the delegation arrived, with their clipped conversations and click of heels, Layla stood among her ancestors' devices: a compass, a bone-handled ruler, the battered cases of pigments ground with spice, performing her duties with measured detachment. When one official lifted a globe, marred with unfamiliar corrections, he asked, "And who drew this?" Layla met his gaze, refusing to shrink. "My grandfather, sir, from memory as well as measure." The official nodded, noting it as a curiosity, not a legacy. Yet the exchange filled Layla with resolve to bear witness, even if the future insisted that history be rendered as artifact rather than living discipline. That evening, she lingered alone in the storeroom, her fingers finding the edge of the unfinished ancestral atlas. By lamplight, she added the newest layer, shadows of recent roots, markers only those who listened closely would decipher, the silent testimony of wells and forests. Footpaths whispered through generations, but banished from official charts. In those solitary moments, Layla sensed herself becoming less apprentice and more steward, the last, perhaps, but not merely a custodian of loss. She realized that true cartography extended beyond the surveys and signatures. It dwelt in the act of recording not the orders of empire, but the memoryscape of its people. When she wrote, she left deliberate blanks where the future might footfall, as if inviting the next lost traveler to mark their course, to claim their own memory against the sanctioned void. Majar departed soon after, his farewell brief but heavy with unspoken gratitude. Layla walked the streets that night, watching shadows mend their rifts in the alleys, and feeling the city's layered stories circulate, even where the wind stripped away old banners, or a neighbor's house stood raised in the name of progress. The city endured, not always triumphant, often scarred, but possessed of a secret resilience. She greeted a baker who once delivered bread to the atelier, passed a gate where her mother's friend had lived, and paused by a fountain inscribed with verses nearly worn to oblivion. Every corner bore the faded footprints of someone who remembered the land otherwise. Eventually, Layla returned to her rooms, the atlas wrapped beneath her pillow, listening by candlelight as the distant calls of nocturnal vendors wove through shuttered lanes. She realized then that maps, like songs, were never finished, always awaiting the next hand, the next voice to layer over absence with presence once again. Closing her eyes, she held her legacy close, a living record in ink and dust, hopeful in its incompleteness, certain that so long as even a single page remained, the soul of a vanished world might someday be navigated anew. The sun clings to the pale-edged horizon above the red earth, its heat softened by the late afternoon, as the market square comes alive with voices that ebb and rise like the tides upon distant shores. Here, beneath the acacias whose roots tangle deep into ancestry, and whose leaves tremble with the same breeze that once carried the laughter of grandmothers, Tor sits cross-legged on a reed mat. The Cora rests in his lap, half instrument, half inheritance, a calabash whose deerskin gleams like a silent promise, 21 strings shining gold in the slant of light. Around Tor, the world spins with the commerce of daily life. Vendors lay out indigo cloth flecked with ancient dye. Dried dates claw their sweetness into the air, and coils of smoked fish hint at the rumors of far rivers. Barefoot boys dart between tall women balancing baskets. Old men squat to argue over the price of salt and millet. And above all, the Cora speaks. Its music flutters beneath the cacophony, a lattice of sound that entwines the listener's hearts as surely as the baobab roots entwine the soil. Tor's fingers dance with the easy agility of youth, each note recalling a story once told under starlight, laments for fallen heroes, laughter for mischievous children, the sorrow of drought, the blessings of rain, each tale held in strings strung tight by memory and longing. There are those in the crowd, the oldest, seated in patient semicircle, who are not there for commerce, but for the remembered echo of their own forebears' songs. Their eyes close against the noise, opening only to the hush between phrases, as if listening for voices only they can hear. Yet this day, strange new rhythms rattle the piece of tradition. The village square, usually threaded with the familiar shapes of Mandinka and Fulani, finds its edge crowded by a caravan of sun-burnished cloth and sullen, unfamiliar faces. Colonial traders, delivering their measured words atop an undercurrent of impatience and gold, have returned. They bring with them bolts of fabric stamped in garish colors, unfamiliar sugar wrapped white as death shrouds, and silver coins that ring cold in the hand, and with them new music, snatches of European melody, and a hurried, urgent pulse that knows nothing of the slow patience of griots. Tor's father, Musa, towering, angular, his gaze as sharp as the blade he wears, approaches from the haggling throng. His hands are calloused from years of exchanging goods the way his father did, and his words, though softened with affection, come weighted with the iron of expectation. Tor, he says, his voice low but firm, the world is changing. Men want salt, cloth, coin. Songs cannot feed a family. Tor does not meet his father's gaze. His own eyes remain fixed on his Cora, where the sunlight pools in gentle ovals. The Cora is our beginning, he whispers, more to himself than to the man before him. Without it, who will remember us when the days grow dry and the memory of rain fades? But Musa shakes his head, gestures toward the bustling negotiations, the foreign traders hunched conspiratorially, with younger men keen for profit. There is no future for dreamers. These strangers offer more than the promise of song. Come, leave this instrument. Sit with me, learn to bargain. Let the griots tell their old stories to empty fields. From the circle of elders beneath the broadest acacia, an old griot, his skin crinkled as dried tobacco, cheeks sunken, but eyes ablaze, summons Tor with an almost imperceptible nod. The elders, each a living archive of miracles and woe, share one Cora between them, its surface worn smooth by centuries of hands. They are remnants of the time when kings believed that memory shaped destiny, and a misplaced song could undo an empire. We are all what the Cora remembers, the old griot murmurs when Tor joins them. His voice is soft as dusk, yet pierces the young man's heart. If the strings fall silent, what becomes of the Mandinka soul? Will they remember the blindness of Sundiata, the laughter of Nana Ismao, the way the wind tasted on the night before the first rains? Around them, colonial sailors shout their strange syllables as they drive ox carts to river's edge. Some youth, their eyes bright with ambition, follow, drawn by promise of distant fortunes, by visions of painted ships and coin. Musa's voice lingers at Tor's shoulder, insistent as summer's heat, but in Tor's lap, the Kora remains, silent now as twilight gathers, yet vibrant as the pulse that threads through history's heart. As the square empties, Tor cradles the Kora and feels himself suspended between commerce and song, between the clamor of the new and the silence of what might soon be lost. Above him, acacia leaves murmur secrets to dusk, and Tor closes his eyes, listening for the voice of the ancestors, hoping in that hush for guidance and for the courage to play on. Night descends along the Bani River, pulling shadows across the village, until every hut glimmers faintly within its own crescent of lantern light. Somewhere beyond, the babble of the departing riverboats, now swollen with goods and foreign laughter, drifts over the threshold of silence. The elders, scattered beneath the canopy stars, hold in their posture an unspoken lament. Tor walks among them, his sandals brushing dry savanna grass, his thoughts drawing patterns as intricate as the carvings on an old balafon. His father's words linger. The assertion that the world's axis has shifted, that value lies in counting, trading, grasping, never in recalling the names of the long gone. It does not escape Tor's notice that fewer gather now at sunset to hear the old tales. Young men prefer profitable errands, and mothers hush their children quickly when the stories edge towards sorrow, as if memory itself could unravel a day's hard-earned peace. Yet the elders persist, aware that oblivion stalks closer than any prowling hyena. It shows itself in the crumbling of ancient proverbs, in the forgetting of which ancestor is owed a bowl of millet at harvest. Their dignity is austere, not desperate, but it is cut with the fine edge of regret, a dignity that endures so long as at least one song remains unsung. Tor's visit to his grandmother's compound brings the scent of she and incense, notes of comfort braided with age. She watches him, her gaze undimmed by blindness, reading his worry as a palm reader skims fate from the base of a child's hand. When the river chooses a new course, she murmurs, grinding hot pepper for stew. Sometimes only the crocodile remembers the old water's path. Her wisdom, neither a command nor a rebuke, settles on Tor's mind like the bloom of silence between verses. Behind these moments, the pulse of the market squares returns. But now, it has changed. Markets bloom, then close, shaped by new rhythms, metal coins passing insistently from palm to palm, haggling voices infused with a vertigo that belongs to newborn opportunity. The Kora's music, when it appears, finds fewer attentive faces. Children imitate the clatter of imported drums, their games echoing the strange metrics of passing traders' songs. This cacophonous hybridity unsettles Tor. He senses in it not richness, but the beginning of unmooring, a river diluting into many shallow streams. At the foot of the mosque, where men gather to judge grievances, an argument explodes about land, about honor, as always, and now about the meaning of community itself. Musa, Tor's father, stands in the thick of it, his voice carrying, firm, clipped, at times pleading. He invokes the duty to adapt, to welcome new ways lest the village starve on the pride of lost glory. But there are others who call, in tenacious Mandinka, for the old balance. What will we become, who forget how music binds us? Over the embers of his family's fire, Tour's brother hums a foreign tune, tapping a glass bottle with a spoon as if to answer some distant call. Tour's heart aches, not with jealousy, but with a strange nostalgia for a world not yet vanished, only endangered. He does not resent his brother's curiosities, but at night, when the world contracts to the circuit of the flame, he feels painfully akin to the lizard that clings to the wall, observing, waiting, invisible in the flickering. Still, the Cora beckons. Tour spends late hours bent over its hollowed gourd, fingers brushing the strings as one invokes spirits by name. Sometimes, a phrase emerges, a song once sung for a harvest, or for warriors returning under full moonlight. Yet the harmony is muted now by questions. Is he playing for ghosts? Each note seems to invite not just memory, but the dread of isolation, of being the last voice raised in a language the world is no longer listening to. The year blurs toward its height. Palm trees crackle in the relentless wind. The salt traders, their caravans now more frequent, mark a churn in the village's stance toward itself. Where before laughter bridged generations, there is now polite distance. The children, too, absorb this division. Some repeat tales, hesitant and halting. Others fixate on the promise of coins, fascinated by the shine, but blind to the story behind the sheen. In rare moments, Tour feels at peace, a slant of moonlight on the Cora's skin, a silent recognition in the eyes of an elder. Yet peace sits lightly. It is as if, in all this quiet tumult, even the crickets hesitate before singing, unsure whose night they are heralding. By dawn, the village stirs disjointed, uncertain. Men shoulder sacks of foreign grain. Women measure silks against memories of indigo. Tour, returning from another night with the elders, feels the echo of music pressing at the limits of his own resolve. In the gathering light, he wonders if a bridge might still be built, one strong enough to carry both the world his father ushers in and the subtle, aching beauty shaped by the hands of those who shaped him. A season of uneasy stillness follows as Tour's world continues its slow rearrangement, the changes insinuating themselves into daily habit rather than through edict or clash. The fields near the village ripen, millet and groundnut bow under the weight of their own fruitfulness. But even the cycles of planting and reaping shoulder an attendant strangeness. Foreign seeds mixed in with those sown from hand to hand for generations. Their green unfamiliar and almost luminous in the warm dusk. Inside Tour, rebellion stirs not as outcry, but as a determined hush. He moves through the lanes of his village with a deliberate grace. When his father's voice measures out the price of new beans or calculates what might be gained from a foreign trader's promise, Tour listens. And yet, there is a gentle refusal glittering at the edges of his silence. He attends every obligatory errand, helps to weigh and sort. But his real work begins after dusk, when the market's clamor withdraws and the lanterns burn low. It is then, in a small hut whose walls are fragrant with the histories of incense and the faint, sweet sharpness of dried mangoes, that the true purpose reveals itself. Tour becomes a student of absence. He sits with the Cora and listens first, listens for the softest noises, the tremor of his own breath, the jittery pulse in his thumb, the sighing recollections that live between ancient chords. He does not play for applause, for there is rarely an audience now. The old griots, hearts beating low but steady, join him some evenings, their presence lending both gravity and license to his experiment. In these gatherings, a circle no larger than memory itself, Tour hesitates at first, waiting for the permission of precedent. Yet the elder's eyes, set deep in faces as measured as river stones, express their tacit blessing. So Tour bends tradition, coaxing elusive patterns from the kora, letting strings ring with pauses where once there would have been relentless melody. He laces silences within the music, as if to allow space for ghosts. It is not innovation for its own sake. It is a way of rendering loss audible, a tentative hope that in naming change, he can lessen the ache of transition. Tour starts weaving in new sounds, the echo of foreign drums, gentle, uncertain, a motif learned by listening to the clinking coins in the market, their staccato pulse woven carefully, almost shyly, into the tapestry of his playing. The kora under his hands becomes an instrument both wounded and awakening, a recorder of fracture, but also of curiosity. His father at first suspects only loitering. It is Tour's mother who divines the nature of her son's defiance. Standing in the dim light of the entrance, her headscarf painted blue by the moon, she asks him if what he plays still belongs to Mandinka. Tour, uncertain, can only answer, "It belongs to my longing." She says nothing in response, letting her palm rest on the doorpost, caught between blessing and worry. But word sweeps through the village, as it always does. The elders, some wary, others delighted, debate what Tour is making. Is it Mandinka? Is it foreign? Is it even music? For some, this is a dangerous indulgence, the relinquishing of vigilance before an encroaching tide. For others, a spark of proof that what survives is not always what is unchanging, but what is called forth anew, whispering from the heart of what risked forgetting. One cloud-washed afternoon, a small cluster of children gathers by Tour's door, drawn by word of his night playing. Too shy to stay, they slip away at his first glance. But sometimes a brave few remain, silent but observant, their hands unconsciously tracing rhythms in the dust. At these times, Tour plays more simply, plucking melodies that were his own lessons once. Water fetcher's songs, the lilt for pounding yam, patterns of rising sun. He sees before him, fleetingly, an audience not yet lost to commerce, not yet distracted by the glimmer of elsewhere. Sometimes, a trader from another land passes by and halts, captivated not by the novelty, but by the unexpected resonance, the sense that this music, for all its unfamiliarity, is speaking of something shared. In the fractured world of exchange, a common hunger for meaning finds unlikely meeting ground in Tour's twilight songs. Thus, the quiet rebellion sustains itself, a thread, not a banner. It is an act less of resistance than of remembering aloud. Around Tour, the air thickens with possibility, as if each note might braid together what the world insists on unraveling. And on some nights, after the songs and debates have faded, Tour dares to hope that in the subtle changing of the tune, there might be, against all odds, a future for the kora that is neither relic nor ornament, but a living tongue still learning to speak. The year's rhythm sharpens, harvest gives way to leaner months, and the physical work of survival presses with new urgency as stocks dwindle and weather grows capricious. The village, once gentle in its routines, now walks a taut line between hope and hardship, its people knitted together by necessity, yet increasingly split by purpose. Tor moves among them, his hands marked by the weight of baskets and the bite of cold water, his face grown leaner with the discipline of waiting. His nightly songcraft persists, secret and steady, running beneath the day's toil like a hidden root. The arrival of colonial administrators is announced not by celebration, but by an eddy of wariness. Their footsteps, measuring out entitlement across village thresholds, bring new edicts, rules about property, fees for land, instructions for harvest that disregard the pulse of seasons. In their ledgers, the Cora is only a curiosity, a strange distraction. Yet, as their presence settles, sometimes polite, but keenly awake to what can be taken, the old patterns of life curl tighter around what is threatened. In houses marked by the waxed shine of ancestors' portraits, faint outlines pressed into earthen walls, debate sharpens. The world listens for a drum it has never heard, murmurs one of the elders to Tor, as the community gathers beneath a moonlit baobab. But it's our strings they'll forget first, and with the strings, the wisdom that wandered in between. Such talk galvanizes some, repelling others, a younger generation, their eyes bright with ambition and the ache for security. Advocate not compromise, but full departure. Why defend what is no longer profitable nor seen as brave? Yet others dig in, relearning prayers and songs, reviving rituals thought left behind. They come to Tor as dusk loosens the world's grip, curious if he might teach them, not the staid epics of old, but the new forms he has conjured from the churning of loss and desire. Tor's sessions grow in number and intent. Friends convene quietly at first, children, a few uncertain cousins, one or two of the emboldened elders. They bring scraps of food, a flask of tea, stories of the day's indignities and small victories. The Cora, its voice both familiar and newly strange, becomes the axis around which they spin their own resistance. Worn laughter and staccato hushes, sharp arguments quickly forgiven, the tentative blending of tradition with something that cannot yet name itself. Tor listens as much as plays, letting his music shift with each heart that enters the room. He is not griot in the classical sense. He is too full of question for the office of certainty, but he becomes the hearth, the place to which the uncertain are drawn. Outside, the village fields reflect the confusion of the human sphere. Imported tools are scattered among hand-hewn implements, some yielding faster harvests, others lying abandoned, unsuited to earth that remembers a slower caress. Children, left alone amid rows of bean plants, invent new games, fusing words from dialect and colonial tongue, their laughter a song that no griot could have foreseen, a testimony to adaptation as much as loss. One evening, Tor is bidden to play at an assembly where elders and colonial officials debate the future of the village. Under the scrutiny of both, his Cora feels heavier, the strings stiffer in the cool air. It is not a moment for innovation. The tune he selects is old, entwined with longing and petition, a reminder of kings who once weighed justice to the tempo of music. The melody, slow and insistent, passes through the gathering like a question to which no one holds the answer. The village elders lower their heads, the officials force polite smiles, but when Tor dares, in the closing phrase, to braid a foreign motif into the lament, the effect is disquieting, a fracture that both exposes and, in a subtle way, heals. Afterward, he lingers beside the embers, wreathed in the tension of competing worlds. One elder approaches, voice husky with fatigue and reverence. We ask not for preservation without breath, Tour. Give us change if it comes with remembering. The words settle over him, kin to blessing and warning alike. Against the city's encroachment, his small circle becomes bolder. Young men and women caught between markets and memory gather with Tour to practice both song and silence, a resistance of custom and an act of self-creation. In these sessions, rules blur, a melody winks at mischief, another closes on a chord borrowed from a Christian hymn, another dissolves entirely into the echo of rain. They begin to understand that there can be harmony without uniformity, an inheritance that is neither passive nor rebellious, but a living negotiation. So a new music takes root. Its beauty lies not only in defiance, but in its capacity for resonance, the way it gathers all it touches, listens as it asserts, and bends, but does not accept erasure. In the narrow lanes, as the last of the dry season passes and palms begin to whisper of rain, the memory of the Cora grows more complicated. It is lament and longing, yes, but also a gentle, persistent uprising. The promise that in the heart's secret chambers, some chords, once plucked, will never quite fall silent. Rain arrives with the tenderness of a long-forgotten promise. The first drops fall at dawn, soft on rooftops coaxed silver in the gentle new light. For the Mandinka, this is the truest turning, a time when earth exhales and seeds, hidden in drought's stern embrace, begin to stir, called forth by rhythms older than memory. On such a morning, Tour wakes before the birds, the scent of rain-laden clay rising around him, a balm not only for parched fields, but for the uncertain hush that has hung over the village for so long. The Cora stands where he left it at night's end, its body gleaning the stray pearls of mist. Tour approaches with reverence touched now by ease, feeling how each dawn, each gathering, has worn away the sharp edge of his loneliness. No longer merely the keeper of an endangered art, he awakens to the notion that a living tradition need not be identical to what came before. Rather, it endures by adapting, bending toward the future as faithfully as shoots lean toward the rain. Within the village, a quiet transformation unfolds. Old rivalries seem less urgent, tempers tempered by the labor of planting and the small miracles of growth. The circle around Tour has grown beyond his imagining, children whose first language now blends Mandinka and foreign sounds. Elders offering counsel, flavored with warmth and wry concession. Even his father pausing longer at the doorstep, listening more attentively to the subtle shifts in his son's playing. Commerce persists as it must. Wealth is measured still in harvests and coin. But the value of shared time, of collective listening, has quietly risen, a new and less visible currency enriching the day. Tour's sessions beneath the sheltering branches of a new-grown tree bring faces from all walks, dreaming youth and pragmatic traders, venerable women with tales sharper than their granddaughters' opinions, and the quietly curious, those who never learned the old stories, but find themselves nonetheless moved by the music's patient unfolding. Here, Tour no longer guards the Cora like an heirloom. Instead, he places it in eager hands, guiding small fingers to pluck hesitant patterns, laughing softly when missed notes spiral into improvised invention. Sometimes, he plays alone at the village's edge, letting his music drift where land meets water and frogs call out in wet jubilation. These moments belong to nobody but himself and the unseen audience of ancestors. In one such vigil, Tour senses, less as thought than as pulse, the presence of those who have gone before. They do not speak in remembered words. Instead, he hears their comfort in the certainty of his own playing, in the measured way rain teases the Cora's skin. What once was solitude has softened into kinship, a lineage not of names, but of sound and attentiveness, of courage to change and faithfulness to what endures. As months turn, there arrives a festival day born not from centuries-old custom, but from the desire to mark what is shared in the new era. The village prepares together. Women dye banners with tangled hues. Children cut garlands from leaves and faded cotton. Young men roast maize. The air thick with mingled laughter and the sting of wood smoke. A stage is built from rough planks, not too grand, but lovingly swept, beneath the same tree that once shaded tours' secret rehearsals. On this day, there is no audience and performer, only participants, each offering a fragment of their own inheritance. Tour leads with a song recognizable, and yet utterly transformed. He invites elders to chant old verses, children to add their invented refrains, traders to tap foreign rhythms on borrowed drums. The music expands, unhurried, its harmonies admitting mistake and joy alike, drawing from every presence, those of flesh, those of memory, those of longing. In this collective weaving, the Cora is no longer merely a vessel of nostalgia or warning. It has become a crossroads where histories meet and make room for futures neither feared nor blindly awaited. Night, when it falls, leaves the community in gentle communion. Lanterns gutter low but never fully darken. Stories trade laps and pass into dreams. Before sleep, Tour steps outside to listen, not to the chorus of frogs or the distant call of the river, but to the human hush, a pause between what has been and what may come. In that silence, he finds neither emptiness nor loss, but a resting place, the harmony of many voices sustained and sustaining, the soft but certain promise that the Cora and the spirit it carries will never again be wholly alone.